Hello, everybody. It is time for our Friday night chill Q&A hangout. If you would like to grow as an artist and you can't take an art class, we've got everything you need here at Art Prof: critiques, tutorials, professional development, and workshops. Tell me in the chat, how has your artistic week been? Tell me about any projects you've been working on, any new art supplies that you purchased, because the art store, it was on the way home. You just had to step in, right? And tell me, like Jen, if this is your first time catching a live stream, welcome to our stream. And I had quite a busy week this week because I finally had to draw. I have not been drawing very much lately because I was in that trip to Boston. I've been doing just so much shooting that I've just been buried in editing. But I did manage to spend some time with Wolverine. Here he is. He's not remotely finished yet at all, but I like that he's in progress. And he's now on my easel. And I have a Hugh Jackman cutout over there. And I'm like, this is good. I enjoy this. I enjoy having him with me in multiple places. And so if you miss the stream, the material that I tried out this week was graphite putty. Tell me in the chat, who here has used graphite putty before? Who here has never heard of it? Who here has heard of it but has never used it before? Spoiler alert, I was not a fan. It was just really crumbly. And somebody during the stream looked up on the Viarco website about whether you can change the consistency so it wouldn't be so crumbly, and that basically said, oh, you can add more water. But unless I had like a mortar and pestle to really do it, I mean, it still kept crumbling. It was impossible to erase. So I do want to work on this piece more, but I have to think about how to actually go about doing it because the putty was not flexible. And I found myself really liking graphite powder way more because I'm somebody who just really likes to draw with an eraser. And so if you take that away from me, I am not happy. So I thought I would show some of you the lead up to the graphite putty. So this first initial sketch and this one too, this is just a graphite stick. And you can see that it's pretty mushy, very tonal. I don't tend to do a ton of line work when I begin a drawing. And now this is where I started adding the graphite putty. And really, it did very well when it was wet. So a lot of the strokes that you guys are seeing, that is the brushwork. So I would put down the putty a little bit wet and then take a wet brush and move it around. It actually reminded me so much of liquid charcoal, but I found it more difficult because the liquid charcoal has a nice smoothness to it. This was just all rocky and weird. I was not really a fan of how that looked. Well, I'm glad, Lisa, that I helped convince you it was too messy, which is saying a lot for me because I generally don't mind getting messy, but it got into my hands and I found it very unwieldy just as a piece. Like I would try to draw with it and it would crumble. And so I just found it to be extremely unreliable for that reason. Yeah, it was basically a nightmare. I mean, I have not given up on Wolverine. I feel like I can salvage that. And actually, one of the things that I started doing after the stream, who knows if I'm ever going to do this. So here's where I left off. A lot of work needs to be done, but I started playing around in Photoshop some more because I think especially for images, like let's say I wanted to make this into a movie poster or something like that, they don't tend to do so well if they're just straight black and white. And so these are just really, really quick Photoshop things that I tried. And I think ultimately this is the one I like more. The other one, oh no, this is the one I like more. Sorry, this one's a little bit more brown. You can see this one's sort of pink, and this one's a little bit more saturated. And I feel like I like this one better. But I think what I'm going to do, because I talked to my art director, Ashley, who some of you guys have heard from on some of the live streams. I actually saw another movie poster that had a similar color scheme, but I noticed that they did some painting in the orange. So what I might do is with some orange acrylic paint or red or something like that, do a painting that would then be a layer over this. So that way the color layer is not so flat. That's the thing I don't really like about this right now. So we'll see what happens. And we also have people talking about Edie's copying photos in graphite using a pencil in Tortillion. We also have, I believe, Lisa did some time sketching at a museum. So tell me in the chat, what was your artistic week like? Brian uses charcoal and graphite, never used the graphite putty. 7A is asking, I'm so curious of the feel. It always seemed like a bit of a mess. It doesn't really have a feel because it just falls apart in your hands. I mean, maybe if you're somebody who draws very delicately, you could, but I'm not like that. I mean, I like to push things. And it just, as I was pushing the putty, it just fell to pieces. And I found that very difficult to work with. Yes. Actually, this is my first Wolverine I've ever done in my life, which is saying a lot because I've been following him since the first X-Men movie in the olden days. And so this is new territory for me. I've never done that before. And I felt a little nervous because I was like, oh my God, Wolverine. So anyway, we'll see what happens. I'm not sure if it's really going to go anywhere. I mean, to be honest, one of the reasons I wanted to do it is because my kid really, really likes Wolverine. It's probably riding the Deadpool and Wolverine trend right now. And so I thought, okay, I can be a good mom and I can be artistic at the same time. So we'll see what happens. I'm just happy to do that because I got to be a good parent, you guys. I have to be supportive of my child about their passion. It's very important to me. And Damien says, posted some watercolor art on my art channel. Good for you. Yeah, YouTube is a lot, and every video that you put up really matters. I think sometimes, I know from personal experience, that you'll put up a video and you work so hard on it and it feels like because you didn't get a lot of views, it doesn't matter, but it absolutely does. Because if there's anything I learned about YouTube is quantity really does matter, because with every video you produce, you learn something new. And I'm always thinking after I release a video, hey, what could I have done better? And because we've made so many videos, it's allowed me to make a lot of progress. So oftentimes people will say to me, well, I don't really want to post anything until I know it's really, really good. And I think that isn't a great strategy for YouTube, because the growth is in making and trying a lot of different things and then gauging your audience reaction. I mean, so much of our content is because people have made suggestions, because I oftentimes really do not know what people are looking for in terms of learning. And so I feel that all of you have guided me in terms of the content to create. Remember, this is your opportunity to pick my brain. So anything you would like to talk to me about is fantastic. And reminder, today is the last day to register for fall workshops. We have a whole bunch. We've got soft pastel, mixed media drawing, mini sculpture, which I'm excited about, fall landscapes. I mean, I'm excited about all of them, but we haven't really done a sculpture workshop before because sculpture can be tricky. And I thought, oh, if we just make sure that everybody's making a sculpture that's really small. It should be very manageable. It's when you start getting into bigger things, it's just very difficult to do virtually. Delicious still life, master copy, all kinds of cool offerings. Remember, the workshops are a 2-week experience. You get 2 weeks of written feedback and a 3-hour live session. It's a really small group. We limit all the workshops to 12 people. And so you really get to spend in-depth time with me. And we also have Butter, painted porcini from life after a successful foraging hunt. Oh my gosh, you know what, Butter? My spouse actually went mushroom hunting literally a day ago. Just went overnight to southern Utah, the place that we typically have gone to in the summers, because the mushrooms were ready to go, and brought home just this huge bag of mushrooms, and we cooked them all last night. Oh, those foraged mushrooms, the ones that we get, they're called Boletus edulis. I mean, they taste like meat. They don't taste like the regular grocery store mushrooms. So they're some of my favorite things. Oh, yes, Sonnet. Some John Singer Sargent love. Can we discuss? We absolutely can. Now, some of you might have missed it, but basically the reel that Sonnet is talking about is, if you look here, it's this one. This painting made me gasp. And so there is a wonderful painting by John Singer Sargent at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. It's called I'm going to say it wrong. Somebody already corrected me. I guess it's pronounced Halelo. I'm so sure that was wrong. But anyway, it's spelled Jaleo. And it's this beautiful flamenco dancer and musicians in the background. And you know, when art, it just affects your breathing. Like, there was one of those moments. So that was a really amazing thing. So tell me in the chat, who here knows about John Singer Sargent? Who here has never heard of him? Who here has been to the Gardner? How many people know the painting? Because, oh my God. You know, when you see a piece of artwork, it is just so magnificent, and it just takes you out of reality. I mean, that's really how I felt. Like, I felt like I was in the painting because of the way that it's displayed. It actually has objects next to it. If you guys look at the reel, you can see what I'm talking about. Tali says, I'm brainstorming what I want as an artist. How has Patreon changed you or your artists? I mean, Patreon is what makes it possible for us to have free videos. If we didn't have Patreon, we wouldn't be here. Or we'd have huge paywalls and make everybody pay for everything. And so that's why at the end of every stream, you guys see we always have a big shout out to our Patreon supporters, because no exaggeration, if we lost our Patreon, we'd go under overnight. That's how big and impactful the Patreon is. It is the vast majority of our budget comes from Patreon. And so we just wouldn't be here, or we'd have very big paywalls. But I will caution, and tell me in the chat, has anybody here ever thought about setting up a Patreon, or maybe you already have one? I don't advise for a lot of people to do Patreon because it's incredibly difficult to make anything significant. I feel like I read somewhere there's some statistic that, and I totally don't have the correct numbers, but it's something like 99% of the money people make on Patreon comes from 1% of the people that have accounts there. And so it can work, but it's difficult, I think, especially for individual artists. I think it's usually better when it's something like us, where it's a collective number of people and you're supporting a larger community than that. Absolutely concordant. I think this is excellent advice for all social media, saying that a personal connection is so much more lasting than something polished or perfect. I can tell you guys, I've produced videos that have taken me 50 hours to put together, that I really thought of as being polished. I never thought of them as perfect, but I really spent a lot of time, and sometimes they perform really badly, which makes me sad. But that's where I say to myself, okay, that video was for me. It wasn't for the algorithm. It wasn't to please the audience. I made that video like that because I wanted to. And the hope is that people will see that. But the fact of the matter is, a lot of the long form videos that I really invest time in, they don't do well with the algorithm because they're not super to the point. That they meander a lot. That's what a lot of my travel videos do, because when I travel, that's what it's like. You travel, you don't know what you're gonna come up against, which is to me why it's so exciting. And Lisa attended the Thursday Open Studio, who says, very chill, it got me to do something different. Yes, if people don't know about Open Studios Club, this is a fairly new program, and it's basically a 2-hour voice session, but it's super casual. It's not like a workshop. The workshops are very focused, and we have a very particular thing we're trying to work on. Open Studios Club is really cool because everybody comes and does their own personal projects. And some people use it sort of like a live podcast. Some people love chatting. I love chatting. And I've just gotten to meet so many different people and see so many different projects, because while it is really nice to be with a group of artists, you're all working towards something, you're all trying to figure out how to use soft pastel and stuff like that. When you get to see just so many different types of artworks and different artists and talking to them about their processes, that to me is also very stimulating in a way that is really cool. Yes, that is a plastic skeleton behind me. I'm not going to pose it because I'm busy doing this. That's a whole other video. So at some point, yes, but not on the live stream. Sonnet's asking what kind of mixed media will be used. So Sonnet is talking about the mixed media drawing workshop. So that is this workshop here. And remember, registration's due today. What kind of mixed media will be used? I wish I could do the pastels. It's totally up to you, because the thing about the workshops is that it's not like I can make everybody go to the store and buy a particular list. I mean, I could, but I don't think that's very fair. So what I typically do for the workshops is I let people choose their own media, but I do a lot of recommendations about supplies. And so that's why sometimes media workshops like this one, soft pastel, that's one material, but wow, do we talk about soft pastels? Inevitably, everybody's tried different brands, and it's really nice because we can talk shop a little bit about brands, because I don't think anybody can try every single soft pastel brand. And so we can sort of share with each other. I know I've learned a lot about different supplies. So while you can use whatever you want, I'm so happy to give people recommendations and suggestions for trying things, because sometimes the media really is impactful. Sometimes I see somebody really struggling with something and I know it's the brand, or I know it's the paper that is getting in the way. So materials is absolutely a big part of it, even though we don't require anybody to do anything like that. Blue Beetle is asking about, can you give me any tips on drawing? Can you be more specific, Blue Beetle? If you follow up with a more specific question, I'm happy to help, because wow, drawing is a really big topic, and I would be better equipped to answer you if you can be more specific. We also have Pagarami, huge John Singer Sargent fan, and The Gardener. And what, Jen? I'm so mad at YouTube. What the heck? YouTube, why doesn't the universe revolve around our channel? George says, love Sargent. I do copies of his portrait drawings as an exercise. That's a really good thing that you brought up, George, because you know something, John Singer Sargent, he's so well known for his just magnificent portrait commissions and the life-size paintings, and they're extraordinary. But he did amazing charcoal drawings. And you know something, I have not released this yet, but I did have the opportunity to go see his murals. that are at the Boston Public Library. And of course, I filmed all of it. And that's going to be released pretty soon. But I'd never really seen the murals in depth before. And I just had this whole other appreciation for him as an artist after I saw the murals, because it really was seeing him speak a different language entirely. But also his watercolors, I think, are better than his oil painting portraits. Not because they're flashier or grander, but I feel when I look at his watercolors that I see more of his voice, because as you know, with a portrait commission, you're trying to please a client, but it's pretty clear when you look at his watercolors, he's not needing to do that. And so I've always loved how honest and true those watercolor paintings are. Oh, so Brian's first Sargent was a portrait he did of President Theodore Roosevelt. It was only later that I learned about Madame X. Yes, if you guys don't know about Madame X, the painting by Sargent, look it up right now, because it's an incredible painting. It was scandalous. People thought it was just so awful. He got into really big trouble for that painting. And hello, Lena, new here, new to Artworks. Well, welcome. And tell me in the chat if this is your first time here, or lurkers. I love it when you guys say hello. Just say hi. That's it. You don't have to say anything else. And Damien says, heard of Sargent. He seems to be a favorite for a lot of artists. Well, you know what's strange, though? That is true. But there's also a whole other chunk of the art world that really turns their nose up at him. Him and Andrew Wyeth, actually, are two artists who, for all the people that love them to death, like me, people who feel that their work is too sentimental to have any weight, or because it's a portrait commission that somehow it's frivolous because they're wearing a pretty dress. And so there definitely is a portion of artists who have that attitude. I've never really understood it. I mean, it's whatever you want to like, but I don't know why you have to get mad at other people for liking them. I've always thought that was a little strange, but whatever. It's okay if it's not your cup of tea, but don't yuck my yum. And we have Amaris. You're the best teacher I ever had. Much love to you and the Art Prof crew. Well, you're so kind to say that, Amaris, because even though, I mean, some of us, there's thousands of miles. You guys are on the other side of the planet. But one thing that we do really work hard to do is to make the online experience as personal and intimate as possible, because a lot of these online platforms, they're like, 15,000 people watch this class. I'm like, I guess that's nice from a money point of view, but it's not really about the teaching when you're trying to show off about all those numbers. Tali says, what would you say to someone who wants to share their personal projects and gain an audience, but not with Patreon, as someone who is thinking of doing Patreon? Well, here's what I figured out after a lot of wasted time on Patreon, is that Patreon, Kickstarter as well, they only work if you give people things. On Kickstarter, they're called rewards. On Patreon, there's various tiers. So for example, our Patreon group, this is one of our tiers. And so when you pledge $20 to our Patreon, you get access to the Patreon group, which is super fun. I mean, that's 24/7 global art party, and I give very long critiques. You get to interact with staff through voice sessions. And so I think the mistake that a lot of artists make with Patreon early on is they think it's about, I want an audience to support me. And yes, you do. I mean, I'm not saying you guys don't feel that way about us. It's not purely transactional, but people generally don't like to give to Patreon if they're not getting something back. So I have found that the rewards on Kickstarter, the tiers on Patreon, for example, you guys know we have that shout out at the end. We've got a list of supporters. And so people get emails from me and Lauren and Jordan. We write a monthly email, and that's one of the rewards. It's also important to have different tiers. Like if you have a tier that's $50 and nothing else, that's not good. You can have a free tier, you can have one that's $5. So that's another important thing as well. All right, Lena, thank you for saying hello. Malia and C, love seeing all of your names. Brandon says, any tips for how much you should practice? I have a hard time focusing on one art study a week, so I try to do multiple a week. Is this a good way to practice? The best way to practice is the way that works for you. And people learn in so many different ways. I was talking to somebody earlier today, and actually it was in the Patreon group. We were talking about having a, quote, consistent practice. And you hear that a lot online. How many of you guys have seen a video or one of those advice things where they say you need to be consistent as an artist to improve? I just don't think that that's very viable for most people, because life happens. Sometimes I carved out time in my schedule. Oh, I got a 2-hour chunk of time. I'm finally going to sit down and paint. And then my kid's sick. And I have to just not do that day because my kid needs me. I can't be negotiable in something like that. And so I have very much accepted that for me, because of a lot of my responsibilities with my kids and stuff like that, I cannot be a consistent artist. And so that's why my practice is not about selling my work. I know I cannot sustain that. And so this Wolverine drawing, I hadn't drawn in, gosh, it must have been over 2 months, probably longer than that. And so I think that's one of the issues, is people think they should learn a certain way, but people aren't like that. I know some people who really like the effort to try to draw every day. I don't like that. That makes me feel very stressed out, and it makes me feel like if I don't do it, I feel guilty or I feel like I failed. And so that whole draw every day thing is not good for me. But I know some people like it. They're like, oh, it's low pressure. I just draw for 5 minutes, and that's great. So I think anytime you guys are in your head saying, well, I should do that, or I should draw like this, I don't think that's such a great thing, because there's a lot of things you can do and try. I think the better word would be try. Like, I should try that would be better than I should do this. Just trying things, I think, is much more important than consistency, because I have a lot of people who they just want to do one thing. And I'm constantly pushing people, you know, something, I know you want to paint, but maybe doing some sculpture would actually help you. And sometimes people don't want to hear it because they're like, I don't want to do sculpture. I just want to paint, which is fine. I'm not saying they have to listen to me. But what I'm saying is that I think the larger issue, other than, as opposed to having consistent practice, I think it's much more about people not being willing to try things. That is a bigger problem from what I have seen. Lisa says, I constantly fight against straightening figure poses. Any tips to improve the fight? I do that all the time as well. What I typically do is, if I have a figure that's in a pose, I exaggerate it. So if the person is tilted, I'll tilt it more. And I know sometimes people feel like, oh, it's too much. But you know something? I know that if I don't do that, it always ends up straightening. It's just like default to something that straightens. And so if I do it too much, I can always pull it back. I can say, oh, that was way too much of a stretch. Let me straighten it up. But it's not very common for me to need to straighten something as much as it is, oh, it's too straight. I'm always sort of fighting against that. And again, that depends on the person. That's not always the case with everybody. But usually if I know that, oh, I have a tendency to do this, I try to overcompensate. Webcam doesn't like me. Maybe if I do this sometimes, I don't know. We'll see. I hope it'll settle in at some point. You guys know what I look like. It's not really that important if you ask me. Pagarami says, I plan on making my first ever edition of woodblock prints tomorrow. I even bought some fancy paper. Do you have any tips for that? Really take your time. Editions take so long, and it is not unreasonable to print 25 prints for an edition of 5. Obviously, it depends on your skill set. I am so not a master printer. So printing in addition for me is difficult. I mean, some of the people I worked with at Shepherd and Maudsley Studio when I was in Boston, I mean, those people, they could addition and they were master printers. I'm so not at that level. And I would just say, don't give up. Like a lot of people will say, oh, I have four. Those are good. It's okay if I have this fifth one that's a little off. Just don't let yourself do that, because I think printing in addition, for people who don't know what we're talking about, so it's basically where you have a woodblock print and you say, okay, I'm going to make an edition of 10. So there's 10 prints in this edition. And the requirement for something to be in addition is that every single print is exactly the same. So if you have one print and it's a little bit lighter than another print in the edition, that's not an addition. You have to make them absolutely exactly the same. And so that's why it is so challenging to print in addition. But I would tell yourself, if you've never done it before, that it can take a really long time. Like I did some editions when I was making mezzotint prints. Oh my gosh, mezzotints are so hard to wipe. And I kept over wiping it. It's just so sensitive and delicate. And I had times I had 30 prints to get 5 that were perfect. I can blame that on myself for sure. But wow, it's a lot of training to become a master printer. We also have 7A. I was watching a video talking about how YouTube may be using creator videos to train their new AI at Google Gemini, not art related, but of interest, I would say. Oh, thanks for bringing that up, because as you know, a lot of people have concerns about AI, and I do feel to a degree it's my responsibility to keep people up to date, because my advice to a lot of people actually is, if you want to learn about something, you just got to find the person who is staying up to date on that, so you don't have to. So for example, Nick Nimmin is a wonderful YouTube education channel that I follow, and who's totally responsible for our 200K subscribers, which we hit recently. And I watch him for YouTube updates. So I don't have to look for the updates. I just go to his channel and I know he's going to talk about it. So I would hope that we're sort of a version of that for some people in terms of staying up to date with AI. BE is asking, when it comes to an art portfolio, is it good to show a project you're working on that isn't from a school art assignment you were told to do? Oh, I think you have to, because the issue with school art assignments, and it depends on the assignment, not every single one is like this, but more often than not, a lot of assignments you get in school, they look like assignments. They look like an exercise. And I think for an art school portfolio, it's absolutely critical that you show your voice, that you're making pieces that are personally driven, not pieces where, oh, okay, let's learn about how circles look up against squares. Those are good. They're fundamentally important exercises, but they're not really portfolio pieces. Or there's a lot I've seen where people are like, oh, draw this tiger in 9 different styles. Here's a Van Gogh tiger and here's a Manet tiger. Like, that's a very school assignment like thing that doesn't look so great in your portfolio. And by the way, if people don't know, we do have an art school portfolios group, and this is for BFA and MFA applicants. You get voice sessions every week, because what I found about portfolios is one of the biggest issues is people just have the wrong information. They're trying to do things that they feel are important because they saw it somewhere, but actually it's not. And so I found a lot of the people who join this group, the first thing we have to do is just sift through all the misinformation that they've been given and set them on the right track. And I feel bad about that, because sometimes I have to say, I'm sorry, you can't use any of the work you have so far. But that's why it's especially important to join early, so you're getting that information and not down the line when you've been working months on something going in the wrong direction. Katz is asking, I have trouble layering white oil pastel over areas already colored in, for example, adding clouds. I'm using the Faber-Castell brand. Is it just lacking pigment, or is there a trick to this? I don't know. What you can do, Katz, so if there's an area and you're trying to put a new color, like really put in a new color, like you're saying with the white oil pastel, the better thing to do would be to find something you can scrape with, like get off as much of that oil pastel as you possibly can. You could even use a ruler for that. I mean, you just take the edge of a ruler and just scrape it off, or credit card that's old, something like that. And so that way, obviously, you're not going to get rid of all of it, but it minimizes the amount of oil pastel that's underneath. The other thing, too, is it depends on the oil pastel brand. So if you have an oil pastel brand that's sort of hard, that's not going to be easy to do. I have found that Sennelier is very good at that. It's super soft, though. Too soft for me. I would use it in small quantities. I did do a live stream with just the Sennelier. It was like drawing with lipstick, way too soft, but it is good. So if you get a white Sennelier and you put it over, it's thick and soft enough that it will turn to white. So a lot of it is that, but try that and see if it works. Yes, Logan. I like that, how in Deadpool and Wolverine, he has that adamantium skeleton in that early scene. Oh my gosh. I just died. I was like, there's got to be an anatomy video in there somewhere. I have no idea what it is, but we'll see. Hello, UHD. I'm so glad that you are joining us today. And Jay King, thank you so much for the super chat. And actually, there's two of them. So Jay King says, I'm seeing Eddie Redmayne in Cabaret. Oh my God, I want to go see him in Cabaret. I mean, I'm not like dying, but I love Eddie Redmayne. He's so sweet. I just love him. And he's so perfect as the MC, being all funky and awkward. I just love that. Although I have watched clips of Alan Cumming when he did it on, I thought he was incredible. I mean, obviously I never saw it, but just based on the clips. Jay King's asking, are there any paintings you would recommend looking at for depicting moonlight? Probably there's a Turner painting that I'm thinking. I feel like there definitely is one that's like a dark, stormy something, but any seascape painting that has a dark evening view. In fact, I'm wondering, there is that Rembrandt seascape that was actually part of an art theft at the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. Look it up. I feel like that one has a pretty dramatic moonlit situation. I'll have to think about it. It's very specific, so I have to rack my brain a little bit. I know. Can you guys believe it? I mean, I was talking to Lauren and Deepti, who were there at the very beginning, 2015. I was talking to them, and they were with me. I mean, they're still here, obviously, but they remember the years and years where just no one watched us. It's total crickets forever and ever and ever. And I remember, it's so dumb in retrospect. And at the time I was like, why isn't anybody like our videos? Our videos are so good. And now I'm like, what was I thinking? Our videos were terrible. No wonder nobody wanted to watch them. It's just so funny when you think back to all the dumb things that you did. And it took us a very long time to get to this point. I won't say that I have it all figured out, but I'm a little better. I feel like I usually know when a video is not going to perform well. And at the very least, I don't feel like I'm just shooting in the dark, which we were doing for years. Now I'm shooting in the dark less, but I'm still doing it plenty of the time. And Eagle says, I don't think AI will replace professional artists. There's value in an original drawing and painting. Can't get with a crappy AI print. However, graphic designers are and will continue to get hit hard. It depends on the context. I know that a lot of publications, maybe the ones that don't have giant budgets, I could imagine from their point of view, it would be faster to do an AI piece rather than hire an illustrator. I'm sure the big publications will continue doing that. I don't think the New Yorker would ever do something like that, but it's going to happen. But I think with any new technology, I mean, think about what it must have been like when photography came along. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall during that development, but people's careers are shifting. I mean, they're always shifting. Can you guys imagine when I was in college, YouTube didn't exist. I have a career now that didn't exist until very recently. And so while there are things that clearly change the industry in not so great ways, I think it's amazing that you don't have to be in Time magazine for people to find you, that you can just put yourself, like, that blows my mind. Okay, how many people here remember the world before YouTube and how difficult it was and how everything was about getting someone else's approval? You had to have this publication had to accept you, or this gallery had to accept you. And certainly there is a lot of that still. But the fact that I can make my stuff and just put it out there and end up with 200,000 subscribers later, like, we never had opportunities like that. So the internet is obviously a mixed place. There's lots of awful things about it, but that's one of the things is that I feel as artists now, because of social media and YouTube, it's like we really can have our own agency. A million challenges. I'm not saying it's remotely easy, but the fact that we even have the opportunity for that, because I'll tell you, one of the things that really made me so frustrated with academia, I just was always just begging on my hands and knees for somebody else's approval. And I hated that. I hated that every time the department had changed, I was like, oh, I got to go cozy up to that department head to make sure that they hire me again. And just everything was about, am I going to be accepted? And I just hated that. It felt so demoralizing to feel that I didn't have any agency over anything that was happening in my life. And I'm so grateful now that if I want to do something, I just go do it. I don't have to ask anybody. It's really amazing. But it's hard. YouTube is not an easy gig by any means. Damien says, trying to get back into painting in acrylic after years of using graphite and now watercolor. Any tips on easing my way back into it? I think a great way to do it, Damien, would to start a painting as a watercolor and then work acrylic on top, because I've discovered that for myself, I'm not really a one media painter. In fact, I do a lot better when I mix like colored pencil or acrylic ink with heavy body ink. And that might be a good entry point for you, because then you begin with a little more confidence because you've been working with watercolor, and then to sort of transition into the acrylic might be really fun for you. Or you can just dive in, however you want to do it. But that is something that's helped me a lot, because I've never been a super confident painter. I never really felt like I was a painter. Same thing with color. I never really felt like I was that good at it. And so for me, the mixed media paint has helped a lot. And sometimes it's all in the same category. Like I could have a painting that's acrylic, but let's say part of it is with the open acrylic, and then I whip out the heavy body, and then I do some fluid acrylic. I really enjoy that. I'm not really somebody who likes to just, okay, 100% fluid acrylic, I'm not going to do anything else. That works for some people. But for me, I like the diversity of that. I can't believe some people were like, is that really him? I'm like, are you crazy? See, the thing is, I've already done that. So here's what I'm thinking, you guys. Because I do want to revamp the anatomy series. It's been a long time. I've just been so busy because of all these shoots. It's been very, very difficult. So we already have the shirtless Hugh Jackman anatomy videos. And yes, I would not mind making more. But something has to happen with Rick Grimes. Oh my God. Who here watched The Walking Dead? There's got to be a video idea in here somewhere, you guys. I don't know what it is. I've been just binging a lot of Walking Dead videos and everything. And I'm like, there's got to be a way for you to make this educational. So that way, when I'm just like watching Walking Dead clips on my lunch break, I'm like, oh, I could use this for a video. But, we'll see. I don't know. Maybe somebody can make a suggestion. Oh my gosh, you guys are terrible. You're making it very difficult for me to concentrate. Okay, the best one says, hi, I just got into NYU MFA in game design. Do you have any advice for people new to visual art in the field of games? I don't have any experience with game design, but my spouse did teach a game design class at RISD in the animation department. It was a brand new class, and honestly, there wasn't a lot of support for that class, and so it was kind of a bummer that there wasn't something more substantial. But the thing I can tell you is that those fundamentals, they go across the board in all fields. So for example, in the 90s, when I went to art school, the foundation studies program, okay, I got to put this away. I can't focus. I have crimes up here. Give me a second. Next slide. Okay, let's look at the fall workshops. Okay, focus. Is that I think this is common, is that people will think, okay, I'm doing this field, therefore these are the fundamentals that apply. And that is true to a certain degree. Certain fields require more or less study of something, but looking at the fundamentals, like let's just say color, it's applicable anywhere. And so I think sometimes what happens is when people start to get very specialized in their fields, there starts to be this, oh, well, I'm doing architecture, I don't need to learn how to draw, which I've heard people say a million times at art school. And I just never understood it. I'm like, how could you possibly think that design doesn't have anything to do with drawing? I think that's absurd. So just always understanding that anything you learn from anywhere can find a way into that specialty. And I know for me, I just see everything I experience, it's all going to one big pot of soup. Because some people will say this to me, and tell me in the chat if you felt this way in the past. They'll say, well, that drawing didn't go well. It was a total disaster. What a waste of time. I really wish I hadn't done that. I don't think it's a waste of time, though. I think oftentimes it's the mess ups where we really fall on our face and we learn a lesson really well, because those are the realizations when you make a really dumb mistake and you're like, okay, let's like never do that again. Okay, that's actually more valuable sometimes than learning how to do something exactly correctly, because there's just so many mess ups before anything starts to make any sense. So Raphael saw the video about vinyl flash paints. How much does it darken or brighten after it's dried? It does, I think, darken a little bit, but it's not enough that I found it to be a problem. For example, I don't really like gouache, because gouache to me is like, what? What color was that? Like gouache really drives me nuts. But I didn't have that experience with the flash paints. So if people don't know what I'm talking about, you can go back. A recent live stream I did was on flash paint, which is a paint that has a vinyl emulsion in it. So it's not the same thing as acrylic. Oh, I don't know. I haven't been as into Michael Fassbender lately because he hasn't done anything. He was in that movie, The Killer, but it wasn't very good. See, you got to have, the timing has to be correct. It has to be your crush at the right moment. And right now, it's just because I'm binging The Walking Dead, it's like all I can think about is Rick Grimes right now. And my kid is going to take me to see Deadpool and Wolverine again. And so, Benedict Cumberbatch hasn't really been doing very much, so I haven't really been thinking about him much, but I'm thinking about Rick Grimes on a daily basis. So let's just keep him up there for a little while longer. And Jen says, love you, Clara, but I'm missing the rest of the staff. Are we going to have any videos with them soon? We will. I believe Kat is coming back in September. She's been away quite a bit of time traveling and teaching at RISD. So in some cases, it's because staff have been away. Like Deepti was in a international place recently. I know Lauren was doing a lot of traveling. So a lot of it has to do with staff schedules and their availability. And you guys probably know over the summer, that tends to happen a lot more. And so a lot of staff have stepped back for that reason. But that's one of the reasons we have a big staff, is so people can come and go. I've also been trying to really hunker down on editing. So I've been having Mia and Dorian do more of that than usual. So it depends on our needs at the time. I'm sorry. I'm going to stay focused. I'd like to keep him up here, but I don't think I can keep it up. And George, thank you. Remembers the world long before you even existed. I love it. I love hearing about those things. Somebody told me once about these old-fashioned glue bottles that I'd never heard of. And I just love those little snippets of life from decades that I'm not familiar with. So we also have 10K, 10,000. It's crazy. Anyone can get famous literally overnight. You know something, though? I know that a lot of people feel that it would be awesome to go viral. But I'll tell you, there's another side to that. Like, I think a lot of people have the assumption that, oh, that's the greatest thing. But as somebody who has had the wrong video blow up in the wrong way, it's not always a positive thing. And I've learned the hard way that I have to talk about things in a really particular manner to not have what I'm saying be totally misconstrued. So, for example, we had a video on Matisse a little ways back, and it was a big problem because it was me and Deepti, and we were at MoMA and not thinking that deliberately. I mean, who really does? When you go to a museum, it's just like all this stuff. And so I said in the video, Deepti asked me, so do you like Matisse? And I said, no, he's okay. Nah, I wasn't that into him. People were so angry at me. That video blew up in a bad way. I mean, it was so bad, we had to delete it on Instagram. People were so mad. And so I've learned through those mistakes that, number one, if I'm going to criticize something, I have to back it up. And number two, a better way to do it is to offer two different points of view. So, for example, Jordan and I went to the Huntington museums and we saw this Betty Saar installation. And I loved it. I thought it was mysterious and moody and beautiful. And Jordan was like, I don't like this. And so I have discovered that that's much better when we can show a more balanced point of view. And also, you guys probably know, I mean, if you look for it, you'll see I'm very deliberate about saying, for me, those brushes aren't very good, as opposed to saying something like, those brushes stink. That's when you get in trouble. So if I say, you know something, I know some people really like this paper, but for me, I find it too rough. And so that's where pumping out a lot of videos and learning from your lessons. So that's what sort of gets me worried, is about being canceled because of something like that, because things just move so fast and I'm constantly afraid that something like that will happen. Because Eagle says, kind of unfair that people can get so successful overnight without working for it. The algorithm selects people at random to promote, and then they get big. It's not so much that people get successful overnight, because you know something, those viral videos, they're everywhere, but you know what? They don't cultivate loyal followings at all. I would so much rather build an audience the way we have. I mean, granted, it was like years of nobody caring about us, but that loyal following, you'll never get that from a viral video, because I've definitely seen viral videos on YouTube. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to look at this. And then I'll go to the channel and I'm like, oh, I'll subscribe. But then I'll just unfollow it later because I'm like, I'm not really that into it. And what is much more critical is people who really truly care about what you're doing long term. And so it may seem like, oh, these people get showered with this stuff. And yes, people do blow up and stuff like that. But we have found success with our community long term, not viral overnight sensation. I mean, sure, I'd like to have the money, but whatever. Brian says, before YouTube, we had tennis, table tennis, darts. Things were different. Yeah, all the time I spent just complaining about being bored. There was like nothing to do or watch because you already watched every single episode that was on the 3 television channels. Thank you so much, Sonnet, for the super sticker. We so much appreciate your support. We also have Raphael says, has anyone seen Jasper Ising's technique? I don't know how to say that. Uses airbrush with just water to create soft edges, blending, and cloudy effects. I have not. Airbrush is something I've never tried that at all. In fact, I'm sort of curious. I feel like because of my age, there is this strong association with like 80s airbrush, heavy metal band things. So it's a material I really haven't looked into that much. So I'd be curious to see the other parts of that, because with any given material, there's sort of a community of people who use it in various ways. Janice says, first time I ever saw you was in a video with Alex Rowe about the difference between oil and acrylics. And I thought, who are these guys? I thought you were like NPR people. Oh, I am so happy, Janice. Some of you guys may know I really like NPR. I mean, mostly I just love Ari Shapiro from All Things Considered. Oh my God, I love him so much. And yes, I know he's in a new Netflix show called The Mole. I haven't seen it yet. Too busy watching The Walking Dead, but I love NPR. Like, that's my dream. I want to be on Fresh Air with Terry Gross. I want Terry Gross to talk to me. That would just be the greatest thing of my life. And yes, I know we need a new anatomy series. Oh, you guys should see my to-do list. It's really absurd. You want to see something? Okay, this is really something. See this? This is my list. Oh wait, there's some spoiler stuff on this. Okay, anyway, that's a big long list of editing that I have to do. But yeah. We also have a comment about Ash. Can you expand on using alcohol markers with acrylic paint on canvas? I saw you do that in a video and it blew my mind. I've been thinking about it ever since. I'm trying to think of which video that was. I think I did Copic marker on paper and then I put acrylic on top. But then I think I also put a little Copic over the acrylic. But the thing is, my acrylic paint is pretty thin. And also working on paper, which is much more absorbent, I think it's easier because alcohol markers don't always work on acrylic ink. And I think it would just depend on the image. I'm not somebody who really has one way of painting. I sort of match my style of painting in the media based on the image I want to make. But try it. It's fun. I really like that stuff because oftentimes there's details I want to add, but painting them is just too tedious. And so doing them in marker can be really, really helpful. And we also have, I love how you guys are all chatting with each other. Miss G wants to know, what are your thoughts on the Tim Burton art style? Oh, I love Tim Burton. I know he's famous for his movies. And even though I'm sort of thinking I won't like it, I have to see Beetlejuice too. I love the original Beetlejuice movie. I saw it in 7th grade and I just love that movie. But if you haven't looked up Tim Burton's drawings, I love his drawings. The early ones from before he was super famous. I feel like he has some book with his drawings. I feel like it has the word oyster boy in it. Maybe somebody here can look it up, but I love his drawings. I think they're absolutely beautiful. Also, we have Raphael is saying airbrush reminds me of those Drew Struzan style of movie posters. You know something? I've been analyzing a lot of his movie posters. I mean, I know for us they look sort of dated because they're from the 80s. So if you guys don't know what I'm talking about, I mean, he designed like every movie poster that you probably know. He did Indiana Jones and The Goonies, like all the really gigantic 80s movies. And the Goonies poster is incredible, the composition. I actually don't really remember that poster when I was a kid, but if you guys look up Drew Struzan Goonies, I think it's one of the most brilliant posters because of the way he composed the point of view. It's just really, really cool. Yurin Suni, thank you so much for the super sticker. You guys, these things really matter to us. I wish I could say that $10 didn't help us that much because we had a good budget, but it's not the case. Like for us, I'm like, oh my God, we got $10. Yes. That's incredibly important. So thank you so much for your support. And that's it. Oyster Boy Universe. So Miss G says his collection of cocktail napkins with his doodles published as an anthology. Oh. I mean, I think that Tim Burton, for me, he's sort of close to Edward Gorey, who's absolutely one of my favorite artists. I mean, not remotely the same. Obviously, they're extremely different from each other, but I think they're really, I love those drawings because it's sort of like when you see Frank Gehry, who's an architect, these just grandiose buildings, but then it's like coming down to seeing his initial gesture drawing, just a pen drawing, and turning it into a building. I mean, that's to me what it is. It's like you see Tim Burton's very simple drawings, and then you see these just incredible filmmaking feats. Join our Discord if you haven't already. It's where all the cool kids hang out because I was not cool. And so I'm like, this is the place for people who are not cool. And it's okay if you were cool. You're still allowed to hang out with us because we're nicer. By the way, tell me in the chat, were you cool in high school? I was not. I was not cool at all. Remember, though, no Discord chat after Friday night hangouts, but this is our 24/7 global art party, and you can come in there, chat with us. We have amazing moderators who keep the space safe and inclusive for everybody, and anybody who is a jerk gets booted out super fast. Big shout out to our top Patreon supporters. Again, we would not be here if we didn't have your support. So definitely, you guys are the foundation of everything that we do, and I am just so grateful for that. Visit artprof.org. There is so much content on there that is not on YouTube. Use the search bar to find the stuff you are looking for. Art Prof has a podcast. It's available on Spotify and also on iTunes. And Buddy would like for you to join our global art community by subscribing to our channel. Everybody, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.